I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. New technologies always bring to light public policy questions. The internet, social media, things like that. When these technologies grow and we use them more, there's issues that we have to solve that come up that are new, that are unique, and that we have to solve with public policy. One area that has a lot of people talking is unmanned aerial vehicles, sort of colloquially known in the media as drones. And a lot of people are worried about these, worried about the way they're going to be used, especially by law enforcement agencies and the government in general. And here in North Dakota, there's legislation. It's become a big debate because there's legislation in the legislative session introduced by Representative Rick Becker, which would limit the use of drones by law enforcement by requiring that they get a warrant before using them in a criminal investigation, among other things. Now, one of the arguments against that has been that the University of North Dakota, which is currently pushing hard to become a center for research into UAVs, they're worried that if this legislation passes, the federal government is going to look on North Dakota as being hostile to drones and is going to pick another spot. With me is Representative Kevin Cramer. And Representative Cramer, what do you think of those concerns? Are they valid? If North Dakota passes this legislation, are we going to be hurting our bid to get that I guess that very important program to the University of North Dakota?
It's interesting because to answer your question specifically, I'm not sure, but all of these things require, I think, a step back and a review from a distance to some degree. But let's face it, Rob, I mean, you set it up very nicely. New technologies and technology advancements always sort of spark or re-spark, in many cases, the same debate. The constitutional rights guaranteed in especially the Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment to reasonable privacy or reasonable expectation of privacy and restraint of law enforcement, the requirement for warrants to search your property, things like that. Those guarantees in the Constitution remain the same regardless of technology. But people were concerned that J. Edgar Hoover was going to tap our phones, and then of course along come cell phones, and the government can sort of keep track of you easier. And then you got Cessnas and helicopters, and now these unmanned aerial systems and vehicles, all of which, again, they don't change the fundamental policies of the Constitution, but what they do is they make us as skeptics of the government. It raises our concern of how the government will use those technologies. Now, those same technologies that can be abused they also make us safer in lots of ways. So the appropriate use of unmanned aerial vehicles for law enforcement is welcome, but the potential for mischief and imposition of government on private lives, of course, is real. And I don't think that it's an unhealthy skepticism that we have in that regard. So whether or not a bill like that would hurt North Dakota's chances to be considered as a test site, and that's really the designation we're speaking of, that there would be there are going to be 6 states in the United States that will be chosen by the FAA as national test sites for testing unmanned aerial systems, and it's really a test to an experiment, if you will, to transition national airspace for the juxtaposition of both manned and unmanned aircraft. And so that, as you might imagine, there are lots of considerations, not the least of which are the technology's ability to avoid collisions and things like that. But with that come a whole bunch of possible concerns. I personally don't find Representative Becker's bill that offensive. While law enforcement, currently has some ability, if they see something by air, they then can go get a warrant and then use that as evidence to get a warrant. Whether they ought to be able to do that with unmanned aerial vehicles, I think you just have to apply the same standard of search and seizure and privacy to unmanned aerial vehicles as you do to every other type of a vehicle.
Now, obviously, airplanes and helicopters, we have those already, and that's an argument that's made often, is that, well, we can already fly a helicopter over your property or an airplane over your property. But that's not really. I mean, if drones, I guess to use that term, were the same as helicopters and airplanes, then why would we be getting drones? I mean, we already have helicopters and airplanes. What's the use in adding this capacity?
Because there's no question, Rob, that there are many more applications. Because when you start talking about unmanned aerial vehicle, you might on the one hand be talking about a Predator or a Global Hawk or something that resembles more of a war plane, but you can have planes as small as 5 pounds that are also considered unmanned aerial vehicles or drones that have different applications. And the application that concerns people the most, of course, are cameras and the ability to shoot video. Well, we love that capacity if it's to protect our borders, because it's efficient. It's more efficient than having a bunch of people on the border. It's also again, the same thing that drives the fear to some degree is the fact that they're hard to see, that you can fly them more covertly. So that has law enforcement and military advantages, of course. But again, that also makes it easier for them to, see people doing things in their own backyard. It has, but the commercial applications are what I think are exciting to a lot of people, and the opportunities that we don't want to miss. But we also want to have balance. Commercial applications such as, farmers being able to have their crops checked by air without needing to invest in a Cessna or to hire a pilot and a helicopter, or the ability to see a flood and how it might be progressing, or how waters might be moving without having to rely on a satellite image, on a cloudy day when you don't get a good clear satellite image. So that there are real applications, and then with that, of course, come commercial opportunities, investment opportunities, job creation, the use of existing infrastructure for those commercial and entrepreneurial opportunities. So, Rob, I guess, there are advantages to having unmanned vehicles as opposed to manned aircraft that may not be necessarily apparent right on the surface.
Well, last question, I wanted to switch gears here a little bit to another issue that your office sent out a press release about, talking about privacy. Recently, the TSA removed several body scanners from the state's airports that have become very controversial in a lot of ways, and that a lot of people feel like those scanners, violate our privacy when we go to get on an airplane. But you want those scanners brought back into the state. What do you think about the privacy concerns for the people who don't like the scanners?
Yeah, no, it's a funny issue, because I don't think our letter necessarily says bring them back. We just want a more thoughtful review of why they're leaving in the first place, and the airports are all concerned about them. And I think some of the concern isn't nearly so much about the viability of the scanners as it is the expense that the airports had to go through, first of all, to receive them, and now the additional expense the airports have to spend to have them removed and have the old ones brought back in. Those scanners, as you might recall, there was quite an evolution, because they went from, first of all, shooting an image that was, basically an X-ray image of your body, and being able to view it right there, next to the machine, to that it evolved then the technology to the person viewing the images was in a closed room somewhere else, so that it wouldn't be visible to anybody else, to now what's more of a Gumby type of an image. It's not your actual body, but more of a Gumby type of an image, and then the scanner picks up any anomalies from that. So you're not literally looking at the individual's body that is in fact in the scanner. So that issue, that initial sort of resistance, an understandable resistance, was, I think, addressed with the technology. The question today is, what's happening in North Dakota is, of course, we're having not only the expense of, first of all, bringing them in, then removing them, and then putting the old ones back in, or some different kind of a scanner back in, but we're doing it in a state where we're actually seeing quite an increase in boardings and whatnot. I don't think there's necessarily a panic about it, but we just wanted to make sure that there was a more reasonable explanation as to why this is happening, and that the transition isn't quite so painful.
Congressman, thank you for your time.
Always my pleasure, Rob. Thank you.